63% of men in the United States are single, in comparison to 34% of their female counterparts. And it's not just relationships. Men aren't really having sex altogether. In a study conducted on males ages 18 to 24, sexual inactivity increased from 19 to 31% between the years of 2002 and 2018. But before I get into the 6 points as to why this is happening, let's take a 50,000-foot view of the situation and look at why people do or don't do certain things. Neurologically speaking, every action that humans take is either to pursue pleasure or avoid pain. So if a large group, particularly men in this situation, are abstaining from relationships, it's probably because they're chasing something that they perceive to be as better, or avoiding the stress and challenges that relationships can bring. To zoom back in, we need to explore the societal motivators that are pushing 63% of men to remain single. So in this video, I'm going to go over the 6 key factors that are contributing to this overall trend. Let's get into it. Which brings me to my first point. Let's start with something that's been quietly affecting millions of men for years: low testosterone. Now, testosterone isn't just about muscles and aggression. It's critical for sex drive, mood, and overall energy. Imagine a young man in his early 20s who, despite being physically healthy, struggles with low energy and a lack of interest in intimacy. He might not recognize that his testosterone levels are at an all-time low. And it's not just him. This is happening to millions of men across the country. Studies have shown that testosterone levels in men have been declining for decades, with a significant drop observed in men as young as 25. And low testosterone can lead to decreased libido, contributing to the overall lack of interest in sexual intimacy. Low testosterone levels can also significantly impact men's mental health, affecting mood, cognition, and overall psychological well-being. Testosterone is a hormone that plays crucial levels in lots of bodily functions, and when testosterone levels drop, it can lead to a wide array of negative impacts. Some of these things, from a psychological level, I'm going to outline here. Depression is one of the most common psychological issues when it comes to low testosterone levels in men. Study after study has shown that men with low testosterone levels tend to experience massive symptoms of depression. This includes persistent sadness, loss of interest in their activities, and feelings of hopelessness. Testosterone is thought to influence neurotransmitters in the brain, such as serotonin, which plays a critical role in overall mood regulation. Low testosterone can also lead to increased levels of anxiety, and men with low test will experience heightened levels of stress, which can exacerbate the feelings of unease and worry. A study published in the Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism found that men with low testosterone levels were more likely to be diagnosed with depression. And as far as a solution, while testosterone replacement therapy has become more and more popular. The second thing we have to look at is cognitive function and how low T impacts this. Low testosterone has been linked with overall cognitive decline, including issues with memory, attention, and overall executive function. Men with low test often experience symptoms of brain fog, which is categorized with symptoms like difficulty concentrating, poor memory, and slower processing speed. And some research suggests that lower testosterone levels also increase the risk for Alzheimer's disease. Although more research is absolutely needed for this, it's important to understand the impact from an overall well-being and psychological executive functioning position when it comes to this problem that we're seeing with men all over the country. Regarding this line, testosterone does have neuroprotective effects, and so a deficiency in testosterone, well, that makes you more susceptible to losing your mind. Another critical impact when it comes to testosterone is the impact that it has on overall motivation. Low testosterone levels are often associated with high levels of fatigue. And if men who are known to be ambitious and highly productive are struggling with low energy levels, well, not only does it tank their motivation, but it tanks their self-esteem. Men with low test might experience really high levels of fatigue even after getting plenty of sleep. And this can lead them to further isolation as they don't even feel motivated or inclined to engage in daily activities. And this over a long enough time horizon, well, it will impact things like work, relationships, and overall quality of life. Now, you might be wondering, what does this have anything to do with relationships? Well, men with low testosterone also experience elevated levels of irritability and increased emotional instability. And this can manifest itself as increased anger, frustration, or mood swings. Yes, men have mood swings too. And this will lead to overall further isolation and complete social withdrawal. And when testosterone levels in men are low, men find themselves more prone to emotional outbursts or difficulty managing stress and overall negative emotion. And if you play this out over a long enough time horizon, well, this will absolutely impact men's self-esteem and overall confidence. When testosterone levels in men drop, they tend to experience a decrease in self-worth. And this can lead to feelings of inadequacy or further feelings of insecurity. And this will absolutely impact their ability to go out and have social interactions. And it definitely stifles their willingness to pursue new opportunities. And due to the low self-esteem and lower confidence as they continue to withdraw, it's going to further exacerbate the feelings of isolation and loneliness. And this will then negatively impact their overall mental state and well-being. And this concept around men's testosterone and self-esteem isn't just my opinion. A study in psychoneuroendocrinology, I know, what a word, found that men with lower testosterone levels self-report lower self-esteem and confidence. Research also shows that testosterone levels in men can fluctuate in response to social and sexual interactions. And this can happen in various ways. Testosterone levels in men can elevate when they are in competitive or dominant social situations, especially when interacting with women. For example, studies have shown that men's testosterone levels increase when they are competing for attention, or when they perceive themselves to be winning in a social situation. Conversely, testosterone levels can decrease if a man perceives himself to be less dominant or loses in a competitive situation. And I want you to remember this point because it will be important later on. Next, we have to touch on the impact of romantic relations and men's testosterone levels. Men often experience a temporary increase in testosterone production when they are interacting with a potential partner or someone they find attractive. This is part of a natural physiological response that prepares the body for potential mating opportunities. Interestingly though, once men actually enter into a committed relationship, their testosterone levels may decrease. And this decrease is thought to promote caregiving behaviors, which are beneficial long-term in the context of that relationship. But relative to this topic, this isn't really happening. So while there is evidence that men's testosterone levels do decline once they get into a relationship, men aren't actually getting in relationships. Now, obviously, engaging in sexual activity can increase testosterone levels. The anticipation of sex, as well as the act itself, has been shown to boost testosterone levels in men acutely. And regular sexual activity has actually been shown to maintain higher levels of testosterone at a baseline for men, specifically over time. But now we have to talk about the things that actually matter within this context, which is why testosterone levels might be declining. Negative interactions for men in particular, such as rejection or social stress, lead to a decrease in overall testosterone production. Now carry that over into the stress related to conflict in a relationship. We can see how this would exacerbate the impact. Now, as a side note, a lot of men who do get into relationships do struggle with lower testosterone levels. And one of the important things that I want you to have is that men, once they become fathers, also see a decline in testosterone production. And this, again, is to facilitate nurturing behavior and kind of bring down the levels of aggression that men naturally embody with higher levels of testosterone, especially with the presence of an infant. But the important takeaway relative to the topic of why men are single, understanding that the impact that a social interaction has, specifically with a female that they find attractive or someone they might be pursuing, if that experience for them is negative, it's going to negatively impact their overall physiology, increasing stress and decreasing production of testosterone. Which brings me to my next point of why men are struggling to get into relationships, or why the majority of them are maintaining their status of being single. We have to talk about the impact of current culture and society with an abundance of fatherless homes. We've heard of women having daddy issues, but we don't necessarily talk about the impact of men growing up without a father and how that can lead to further issues. Without a strong male role model, many men struggle to develop confidence and the social skills that are required for them to navigate an intimate relationship. Think about a young boy growing up without his father around. He might be raised by a super strong, incredibly caregiving and nurturing mother, but there's still a void in his understanding of what it means to be a man in a relationship. And this lack of guidance can manifest itself as insecurity or complete avoidance, or more importantly, driving super toxic dynamics within relationships that they cultivate, especially if his interaction with his mother was, well, volatile. Fatherless homes have been linked to a range of social challenges, including the difficulty of forming healthy romantic relationships. Without the tools and examples provided by a healthy father figure, men will find themselves unequipped to engage in meaningful relationships. And this is because fathers play a crucial role in the development of a healthy masculine in their sons. And this influence is multifaceted, encompassing direct behavioral modeling, emotional support, and the provision of a secure environment where boys can explore their identity and learn the strong form of a healthy masculine. Through everyday interactions, boys learn about assertiveness, problem solving, and how to balance traditionally masculine traits like strength with emotional intelligence. And for fathers who model healthy masculinity, demonstrating respect, empathy, and responsible behavior, equip their sons with the tools to navigate moving into manhood in a healthy way. Now, in another really important note, especially around cultural standards and the pressure that we put on men, specifically when it comes to their emotions, is that fathers who are present and emotionally available for their sons can help them learn to work through their emotions as they continue to grow. And this counters the cultural pressure for boys and men to continue to suppress their emotional state. And this can lead to issues like overall aggression or emotional detachment later on in life. Now, lastly, especially as a clinical psych student, I have to touch on the importance of rough and tumble play. This is a form of physical interaction that often occurs between father and son, and this plays a significant role in the overall development of social and emotional skills. It helps boys learn to regulate their emotions as they go through play, build restraint around their impulses, and understand boundaries while cultivating overall levels of resilience. During rough and tumble play, boys learn the difference between playful aggression and real aggression, and this again helps them to develop overall self-control and also understand other people's social cues. So without this, you can see how the development and manifestation of a man's aggression without the understanding of when is too much can lead to negative consequences, not just for them, but for the people around them. So it may not feel like it's that important when it comes to why men are single. I think it's really important to discuss the absent father issue that we have in our current culture. Without a father or a positive male role model, men don't get the skills or understanding of how to navigate things, especially interpersonally. We learn, all of our behavior is learned, and we tend to learn it by observing our parents, specifically at a very young age. And fathers are important when it comes to modeling how to treat a partner with respect, and vice versa for women, but the conversation today is about men. How do you manage your emotions? How do you address conflict? How do you communicate effectively? And when boys grow up without witnessing these dynamics, it can manifest as dysfunctional, but the problem is they just were never taught how. And if we look into the psychological impacts around this, I'm sure you've heard of attachment styles, but if you haven't, I'm just going to cover the theory here. Attachment theory suggests that children form their initial understanding of relationships through their interactions with their primary caregivers. So when a father is absent, it can disrupt the secure attachment that is required for developing both trust and confidence in the pursuit of a relationship. So for the children who are raised without a father figure, and this is for both parents as well, so when we look at the problem with boys being raised without fathers, we can see how this can lead to them developing an insecure attachment style. And this will absolutely exacerbate problems and challenges when it comes to creating a stable and healthy romantic bond, especially if they build a fear or core belief that amplifies anxiety around the experience of abandonment. And this will lead to a reluctance to engage and absolutely perpetuate trust issues. Now, the last part here around the importance of a father figure, I have to touch on the self-concept and what it means to be a man. The absence of a father can lead to complete confusion around gender roles and self-identity. Boys may struggle and tend to understand what it means to be a man, which can lead to insecurity or overcompensation in their adult life. And the overcompensation complex is either hyper-masculine behaviors that can be incredibly toxic or complete passivity in relationships, which can also be toxic. And this is because they don't have the skill set or tools to understand how to balance and navigate and validate their natural aggression when it comes to their behavior, and also have the emotional intelligence and skills to communicate around how their partner's needs need to be met, as well as validating their own. And as we can guess here, this is going to lead to overall amplifications of adversarial interactions and not having the ability to find resolution within those conflicts. And this over time as a pattern will lead to up and down, a roller coaster of chaos when it comes to trying to engage with something akin to long-term commitment without having the skills to actually navigate that terrain. Which brings me to my next point. We have to talk a little bit about feminism. The feminist movement in itself has absolutely reshaped the gender dynamics within our culture, and this has had a complex and profound impact on men's interactions in romantic relationships. While the movement has largely focused on promoting gender equality and overall the empowerment of women, which was and is incredibly important, it has also led to shifts and consequences with how men show up, behave, and find stability within relationship or in society. And this is because the feminist movement went to challenge the historical gender norms, which has led to extended pressure for men to engage in more egalitarian relationships. And for men, this can create some discomfort, especially those who were socialized and raised under more traditional values and those historic views of masculinity. And this meaning, tactically, that they were the primary breadwinners within the dynamic of their relationship. and the key decision maker when it came to moving forward with the long-term plans within that relationship. But as women gain more education and more economic independence, pairing that with some levels of more assertiveness, or as men would say, masculine women, men feel uncertain of how they fit into this new dynamic. Not all men, but some men. And this can lead to overall restraint or hesitancy when it comes to engaging in any type of relationship. Because these traditional markers of masculinity, as far as financial provision and making decisions, are being redefined and challenged regularly, this can lead to a lot of confusion and overall insecurity when it comes to men, especially their courage and confidence in pursuing relationships. Now, we also have to talk about the increased expectation that we've put on men when it comes to the emotional labor. Most people in the modern world want men to express and communicate their emotions or be much more attuned to them the way that women tend to manifest these things. And while there is importance around men's expression or ability to validate so that they don't compartmentalize their emotions, many of them have not been socialized to engage in this type of work. And to be completely transparent here, I don't think it's even required for all men to function that way. But the pressure to meet these new relational standards can be really intimidating and somewhat uncomfortable for a lot of men. And this will lead them to withdraw from relationships rather than to risk failing or some sort of rejection. Now, we also have to touch on the point of the concept of women being or becoming more masculine. The rise in more assertive and independent women can sometimes create tension in a relationship. And this phenomenon has several impacts on a man's sense of masculinity and his approach to romantic relationships. As women continue to embrace more and more masculine traits, such as assertiveness, ambition, and financial independence, men may feel like their own levels of masculinity are being challenged or completely diminished, as the qualities that once defined manhood are now shared across genders, leading some men to completely question, what is my role in this relationship? And these feelings can lead to questions or feelings of insecurity or resentment, building things like contempt, particularly for men who derive their sense of self-worth and their sense of identity from traditionally masculine roles. And when men perceive that women are outperforming them, especially in areas that are typically traditionally masculine, it can completely cause them to revolt and create more tension between men and women. And the blurring of these lines continues to create power dynamic struggles in relationships. If both partners are both assertive and independent, it can be much more difficult to establish clear roles within that relationship. And this can lead to conflicts over control or any decision that's ever made. And men who feel like their masculinity is being suppressed may react by completely withdrawing emotionally, avoiding commitment, or becoming resentful. And this can lead to them undermining the foundation of the relationship, increasing levels of infidelity, and well, maybe we could even correlate this with divorce. But hey, I'm just speculating. Now, that tends to be more associated with the boss bitch movement, where women are ambitious, independent, and don't need no man. Again, kind of emasculating the traditional male role. However, I think another movement that's relevant to this conversation is the Me Too movement. And this brought necessary attention to sexual harassment and overall abuse, emphasizing the importance of consensual and respectful intimate interactions. However, in contrast, it's also amplified feelings of anxiety for men in particular. It feels like they're always on edge with needing to process and make sure they articulate consent, while also needing to feed into their natural male assertiveness or aggression when it comes to being the partner that pursues. And this isn't just something that men talk about. This is also something that women talk about. But it's hard for them to walk up to somebody without feeling like they might be coming off as a creep or crossing a boundary. And this has led men to become significantly more cautious when it comes to pursuing any type of curiosity around pursuing a potential person that they find attractive, because they fear if they make any perceived misstep, it could be seen as inappropriate behavior. And this anxiety can lead to complete withdrawal from any type of pursuit of a romantic partner. And men find themselves having this inner conflict of balancing their levels of assertiveness with respect for boundaries. So the combined effects of these movements and shift in gender dynamics overall are driving significant changes in how romantic relationships are formed and sustained. Which brings me to my next point. We have to talk about the red pill space. Picture a young man scrolling through social media and coming across the content of these extreme communities. He's bombarded with messages about the dangers of engaging in any type of a relationship with a woman, leading him to adopt a more defensive stance. towards relationships. The red pill space and MGTOW movements have grown in response to these perceived injustices towards men and in the modern dating world itself. And these communities tend to argue that modern relationships are fraught with risks for men, leading many of them to opt out entirely. Now, it's important to note that these things do exist for a reason, and they tend to stem from a very genuine place. It's valid that many men are entirely frustrated with the modern dating world, and I can empathize with that. However, they also tend to perpetuate these negative stereotypes and discourage men completely from seeking meaningful relationships, leading to a cycle of isolation and resentment. The red pill and MGTOW, and if you don't know what MGTOW is, it's men going on their own way, have gained significant traction, specifically in recent years, particularly online. And they provide a space for men to discuss openly their experiences, frustrations, and perspective on modern gender dynamics. And these communities are often seen as a solution in contrast to the complicated landscape that we're facing right now within the modern dating world. They talk about things like relationship dynamics, feminism, and societal expectations of masculinity in the modern world. Now, this may seem like a dark space, but there are some positives here that I feel are important to discuss. Again, these spaces, well, they're here for a reason. They serve some form of function that we should pay attention to. Men have found a space or a community where they feel seen, heard, and understood, especially if the culture and society around them is telling them that their thoughts, desires, or perspective is toxic, especially if they've gone through experiences like rejection or divorce. So they are able to find a space where they can validate and verbalize their own experiences while also gaining perspective and feeling related by, where they can share their stories and find some semblance of solace with other men who've also gone through similar experiences. And this overall may help them find a sense of control in their lives once again, encouraging them to focus on self-improvement, financial independence, and personal growth. This is one of the things that I actually agree with when it comes to these communities existing. They do really emphasize a man being masculine, being ambitious, pursuing something, and becoming somebody. But this focus on becoming the best version of oneself can be somewhat productive, and it can lead to overall increases in their self-esteem, self-confidence, overall health, and again, financial resources down the road. And by prioritizing their own well-being and their overall goals, men in these communities may feel more empowered and less dependent on sexual activity, particularly from romantic relationships. And now that we've talked about the positives, well, I do have to talk about the downsides here. One of the biggest criticisms when it comes to looking at these communities is that they often foster a deep cynicism and distrust towards women. And the narratives within these spaces particularly portray women as manipulative, hypergamous, and untrustworthy, which can lead to negative and adversarial views of romantic relationships in general. And this mindset can discourage men from pursuing relationships in the first place, as they may become overly guarded, suspicious, or avoidant of intimate connections altogether. And while these communities do discuss self-improvement, they often do it in such a way that enforces toxic masculinity, emphasizing dominance, emotional suppression or manipulation of their partner's emotions, and the objectification of women. And this can perpetuate harmful stereotypes and behaviors that are counterproductive to building any type of healthy connection. And this fixation on hypermasculinity can also cause men to reject any traits that are perceived as feminine, such as empathy or vulnerability, which are essential for forming any type of deep and meaningful romantic connection. Now, the MGTOW philosophy in particular here encourages men to completely avoid touching a woman with a 9-foot pole. And this lifestyle advocates for complete isolation and independence from women. And while this might create short-term relief with the frustrations of dating, which are totally valid, it can also lead to long-term complications of isolation, loneliness, and further exacerbate men's mental health issues. And this is, again, not just my opinion. Studies show that strong connections are crucial for mental and emotional well-being, but by withdrawing from any type of partnership, men will may miss out, I should say, on the emotional and psychological benefits of close and intimate connections. And for anybody that wants to come in and say, well, they have relationships, these relationships are on the internet. And if you've ever met somebody who is mentally stable with only having connections that are on a screen, not one person can do that. Personal relationships in person, in reality, are critical for human beings, in tandem with the narratives that are in these ecosystems. The rhetoric of the red pill and MGTOW spaces often emphasize the risks of modern dating. They talk about divorce, financial loss, and the emotional pain, again, all of which are valid. But this leads men to develop toxic and avoidant attitudes towards relationships, which I have to guess the majority of men actually want, as they become more and more focused on self-preservation and resentment towards women than they do on building genuine connections and cultivating some semblance of intimacy. And this isn't just my opinion. The data supports this stuff. Men who engage heavily in these types of communities are more likely to report dissatisfaction with their dating lives and the lowest desire to pursue any type of relationship. And honestly, I can't blame them with the narratives and communication that go on within these communities. There's lack of trust, there's lack of desire, and you paint women as the evil demon that you must avoid and who is responsible for all of your problems. Now, this is where it gets really important that I don't paint a picture with a broad brush. There are incredibly toxic women, just as there are incredibly toxic men. But if we try to put everybody under one umbrella, everybody's gonna end up alone, depressed, and probably unhealthy. And men in particular, because they are the ones in these communities who tend to internalize these messages and narratives and take them on as complete truth for every woman they ever meet in their entire fucking lives, will struggle to open up to any potential partner because they fear betrayal or manipulation. And inevitably, this will create a self-fulfilling prophecy where men expect negative outcomes in relationships, leading to behaviors that undermine the relationship itself. And this will inevitably reinforce that there's something wrong with women when really it's the subconscious triggers that manifest behaviors of mistrust, betrayal, insecurity, abandonment that lead men to avoid any type of depth, which will inevitably ruin a relationship. Which brings me to my next point, social media. Social media has become an integral part of daily life, and it profoundly affects how men see themselves, especially in comparison to their male counterparts. While opportunities can be provided by social media for connection and self-expression, it also introduces new challenges and pressures that can influence a man's desire and ability to form committed relationships. Social media platforms provide men with the ability to connect with a wider range of people than ever before, and these platforms make it a lot easier to meet potential partners, especially for men who might be more shy or have limited social circles. Dating apps and social media allow men to reach out to others based on shared interests and values, increasing their chances of finding a potentially compatible partner. Additionally, social media can also foster and strengthen current relationships by opening the window for communication, and this enables certain couples to stay connected even when they're miles apart. Another note on social media, relative to even this topic of conversation in YouTube, is that there's a vast amount of information on relationships and anything else, including advice from experts or experiences shared by peers. And this can empower anybody, including men, with knowledge and strategies for building healthy and sustainable relationships. Now, one potential upside and also potential flaw is that it allows people to express themselves and present a curated version of their identity. This can be empowering to a certain extent, the idea that you can be whoever it is that you want to be, and it also gives people the ability to exercise control over their own perception. If it's authentic and through that vehicle you're expressing your personal values or interests, you can attract people with like-minded ideals that resonate with this persona. The negative to that, though, is that there's plenty of people that also curate a version of them that isn't what you would meet in real life. And this is where the tendency for narcissistic individuals to manipulate and control other people for their own personal gain gets really dark. Another negative regarding social media and its presence, especially how it impacts relationships and men, is that it often presents an idealized version of life. Users post carefully selected moments that highlight their success or perceived achievements. We can get angles and Photoshop to highlight attractiveness and ultimately give you a snapshot into a moment of happiness. And this can create unrealistic expectations for what it means to be a man who's successful and also impact what it looks like to be in a healthy relationship. And this constant comparison can lead to dissatisfaction and amplified levels of insecurity when it comes to you assessing your own life. And this can deter men specifically from even pursuing any type of relationship, as they believe that they can't measure up to the perceived standards that are being presented online. And if you've spent more than 5 minutes on social media, you'll see highlight reels of girls on yachts and men who are well healthy, and everybody has this idea that, well, all of these women only want men who have all these fun toys. When in reality, if you go out and actually talk to a woman, most of us don't really give a shit about that. Regardless, the pressure to maintain a certain level of image on social media can lead to increased levels of anxiety and the ultimate fear of rejection, particularly when it comes to shooting your shot with a woman or dating anybody. And this will ultimately continue to put pressure on men to present themselves in a certain light, in a way that they believe will be attractive to other people or women. The problem with that, though, is that it forces men to put on a mask. If that's not who they really are or the lifestyle that they actually live, well, it's easier to create a distance and play the long distance game until you can get somebody to fall in love with you, so that maybe that's enough. And this ultimately driving up the anxiety, making it significantly harder for them to actually cultivate something real in reality. And it'll start to drive this perception of who they need to be while preventing them from actually taking the step and being vulnerable, owning who they are. Because at the end of the day, just as a personal side note, women care a lot more about your kindness than they do about your success. And no, this doesn't mean that women don't care about you having ambition or being driven or being successful in some light. But if you are a successful asshole, I'll choose a kind man who's middle class all day. Now, another negative, in my personal opinion, but maybe positive for you, is that social media, particularly dating apps, foster a culture of superficial interactions and create this casual hookup culture. The emphasis on quick surface-level judgments based on photos and brief profiles can lead to the devaluation of even building a deeper connection. And this will ultimately discourage both parties from pursuing any type of depth when it comes to a relationship. The other problem with this is that optionality doesn't really lead to optimality, meaning that the abundance of options that we always have allows people to keep the door open for the grass being greener on the other side. And this can lead men to searching for multiple different options instead of actually making a commitment to one person. And the same for women. The greater impact on this, though, especially in the aftermath of COVID, is that most people don't really have good face-to-face communication skills. And these are crucial for not only building, but maintaining a healthy relationship. Men who primarily interact online may struggle a ton when it comes to actually communicating or meeting somebody in person. And this can lead to awkwardness and misunderstandings, which will create significantly more difficulty in forming any type of relationship. And over time, this can erode their levels of confidence in overall social situations, making it much more challenging to initiate and sustain any meaningful relationship. So while there are positives and negatives when it comes to social media for everybody, such as opportunities for connection or increased ability to get information, there are also pretty severe negatives. And as somebody who works in mental health, I think it's really important to consider some of the impacts and the trade-offs that we make with having such a wide ability to connect with people, not just in our communities, not just in our neighborhoods, not just in our states, around the world. And this can continue to negatively impact somebody's self-esteem if they don't have confidence in who they are and actually understand where they want to go or where they find meaning in their life. Because you'll always be chasing this dangling carrot that tells you that you're not enough, but maybe you will be someday if you start to do all of these perceived things that make you high value. Which brings me to my next point, which might be a little uncomfortable to talk about, but between 76 and 87% of 18 to 29-year-old men consume pornography regularly. And of these men who use pornography regularly, they report less satisfaction in real life sex. Even more alarming than this, though, is the rise in erectile dysfunction, delayed ejaculation, and diminished libido in men under 40 years old. And this is all associated with frequent pornography use. And this has become more and more prevalent with the expansion of the digital world, particularly among young men. The pervasive and often addictive nature has profound consequences on men's ability to even engage in romantic relationships. One of the biggest factors in this is the fact that they become highly desensitized to real life sex. And this may require them to have to use extreme content in order to achieve even the same level of arousal. And this will continue to decrease their satisfaction when it comes to engaging with a woman in reality, because normal sex doesn't stimulate this same level of arousal. This also creates exaggerated sexual experiences, which will create unrealistic expectations of what it's like to have sex with somebody as a human being in reality versus fantasy. And this will lead to a distorted view of sex and intimacy overall. And this will also put pressure not just on men, but on women for how they're supposed to be and what their performance needs to be like, instead of looking at the connection or the bond that you're creating that is meaningful, in my opinion, and spiritual when you're actually engaging in this act with somebody. And this can ultimately lead to frustration, a disconnect, and overall dissatisfaction in the intimacy or relationship that you're trying to build. And these aren't just my opinions. This is based in research. Exposure to pornography use regularly is associated with greater acceptance of casual sex, which will undermine the stability and emotional depth of romantic relationships. And this drives people to shift away from emotional intimacy to personal gratification. And men who consume pornography regularly find it difficult to engage emotionally with their partner, as their primary sexual experiences are primary solitary and focus on visual stimuli rather than the physical and emotional connection. And this next point's important. The use of pornography can lead to secrecy and shame in a relationship, creating this barrier when it comes to open communication and trust. Partners may feel betrayed or inadequate when they discover their significant other's pornography use, which will lead to conflict, insecurity, and likely a breakdown in the relationship. But while I can sit here and talk about the negatives, just like the red pill space or other extreme communities, we have to ask why men are relying on this so heavily. And for some men, it provides a sense of stress relief, a way to express their sexuality when a partner is either unavailable or uninterested. And it can be a way for them to satisfy their sexual urges without the complications or stress of a real-life partner. And this can help men ultimately reduce feelings of loneliness. If a man's needs are not being met by his partner, or just in general in life, as he feels maybe inadequate due to the unrealistic standards or pressures, yet still has these temptations, well, pornography is an easy accessible outlet for them to get their needs met. And it also alleviates the fear of rejection or inadequacy that they would encounter with a woman, especially with some of the extremist narratives around how women are the worst. But what's important to note around pornography use, especially in young men, it will create difficulties for them later on in life when it comes to trying to form any ounce of intimacy in a relationship. Their understanding of sex is shaped in ways that aren't easily integratable. This early exposure of unrealistic standards in sexual scenarios can shape their understanding of sex in ways that are not conducive to forming any type of deep emotional bond. And over time, this can actually lead men to prefer solitary sexual experiences over the actual physical connection with another human being. Now, lastly, I always have to touch on some semblance of mental health. Excessive pornography use can lead to addiction, where men feel compelled to consume it, even if it is negatively impacting their overall life. And this addiction can interfere with daily functioning, work, and relationships, leading to a wide range of mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. And the compulsive need for pornography use can make it really difficult for men to find satisfaction in real life, further isolating them and then exacerbating mental health issues. So those were the 6 key factors that are keeping 63% of men single. And if you're interested in understanding how men date, then click this video and I'll see you there. If not, fuck off. Bye.